The scream tore out of me before I knew it was mine. Not a dramatic movie scream, more like the raw sound you make when you step on something sharp in the dark. It bounced off the narrow hallway outside my childhood bedroom, mixing with the hum of the old AC and the sweet, sour smell of wilting flowers from the dining room. The first dress lay on the carpet like a body. White satin, or what used to be satin. The bodice I'd let my bridesmaids fuss over was hacked straight through, jagged scissors marks splitting it at the waist. The skirt was slashed into ribbons, lace hung in limp strips. Under the hallway nightlight, the cuts looked almost violent. I stood in the doorframe in an old navy PT shirt and shorts, barefoot, my heart pounding harder than it had on any deployment. My hand went automatically to my collarbone. No uniform there, just skin and the faint mark where my ribbons usually sat. "Mom?" I called. No answer. The house had that deep, late-night quiet, the kind that made the walls feel closer. The smell of perfume and roast chicken from the rehearsal dinner still clung to everything, layered over the dust and lemon polish of this old place. I stepped closer, my toes brushing the ruined satin. There were 3 dresses total, 3 options we'd argued and laughed over for months, because apparently rear admirals get just as hounded by bridal magazines as anyone else. All 3 were destroyed. On the closet door, taped at eye level, was a scrap of notebook paper. The edges were ripped, the ink a quick, angry scrawl. "You deserve it." My mouth went dry. I'd seen that handwriting on birthday cards, on school permission slips, on passive-aggressive notes left by the fridge when I was a teenager. My mother's. For a heartbeat, I told myself it couldn't be. That maybe some stranger had broken into the house, somehow bypassed the alarm I'd watched my father set, crept upstairs, and selectively attacked only my dresses. But that note. My vision tunneled. For a second, I could only hear my own pulse, roaring in my ears. I knelt, the carpet rough against my knees, and picked up a strip of lace. My hands were steady, the way they had been on flight decks and in war rooms, but my chest felt like someone had cut straight through the ribs. The door at the end of the hallway creaked. "Rach?" Kyle's voice, thick with sleep or maybe beer. "What are you doing up? What time is it?" He padded toward me in gym shorts and a faded college t-shirt, rubbing his eyes. Then he saw. His gaze went from the shredded fabric to the note to my face. Something flashed across his expression. Guilt, fear, some awful mix. "Wow," he said. "What happened?" My eyes locked on his. "Don't," I said. He flinched like I'd slapped him. "Don't what?" "Don't pretend you didn't know," I said. "You walked right past this hallway to get to your room. You didn't notice 3 massacred dresses on the floor?" He opened his mouth, closed it, shrugged. Too fast, too loose. "Maybe Dad knocked something over?" he tried. The lie landed between us with a dull thud. I stood slowly. The hallway light flickered, buzzing. "Go back to bed, Kyle," I said. My voice had that edge it picked up when I briefed a room full of junior officers. Calm, but full of warning. He bristled. "It's just a dress," he muttered. "You've got your career, stars. Don't act like some..." "Some what?" I asked quietly. He looked away. "Forget it," he said. "Mom and Dad just think you're making this whole thing about you, about the Navy, about your rank. It's supposed to be a wedding, not a promotion ceremony." I stared at him. "Get some sleep," I said. "Tomorrow's a big day, for everyone." I stepped past him, the ruined fabric rasping under my feet. In my old room, the air smelled like dust and teenage perfume trapped in the curtains. The bedspread was the same one I'd left for OCS, a faded floral thing that had seen too many arguments and slammed doors.
My phone read 2:07 a.m.
I sat on the edge of the bed, the springs creaking under my weight, and let myself feel the impact. I'd led strike groups, negotiated with hostile captains, stood on decks while rockets thundered past overhead. I'd signed condolences letters and watched caskets draped in flags roll down ramps. None of it had prepared me for the sight of those dresses. Not because of the fabric, because of the note. You deserve it. For what? Serving? Succeeding? Refusing to shrink myself small enough to make their dinner parties comfortable? Downstairs, I heard the faint creak of floorboards, my father's measured gait, the one that always meant he was making rounds. The old porch light clicked off, then on again. He did that when he was worried, like toggling a switch could change anything. It used to be my job to sneak past that light in high school, to avoid another lecture. Now I was a two-star admiral sitting in a childhood bed, feeling like the light was aimed squarely at me. My mind did what it always did when things went sideways, sorted through options. Option 1. Call the wedding off. Pack my bag, drive back to the base, bury myself in work until the ache faded. Option 2. Buy a new dress at dawn, pretend it hadn't happened, hand my parents the victory of my silence. Option 3. Walk away from the whole mess, family, wedding, expectations, and accept that some people never change. My thumb found the edge of the small coin in my pocket, the one Master Chief Hollander had pressed into my hand the day I'd pinned on my second star. For when you forget who earned it, he'd said, not what they think you did. The metal was warm from my skin. Stars, ribbons, rows of tiny, colored reminders of a life my parents had never really asked about. They saw them as distance, as arrogance, as proof I thought I was better than the small town and smaller expectations I'd grown up with. They never saw the nights in bunk rooms, the salt in my hair, the times I'd watched the horizon for hours, waiting for a contact to appear that I prayed never would. They saw dresses as control. I saw my uniform as truth. Somewhere between those two was the path to the altar. My phone buzzed. One new message. David. Can't sleep. You okay? I stared at the screen, the glow harsh in the dim room. My fiancé was across town in his parents' guest room, probably lying awake in his own childhood bed, wondering if I was here, wondering if we were really doing this. I typed back, I will be. Then I added, they cut my dresses. All of them. Dots appeared immediately. David. What? Who? I replied, we'll talk in the morning. I have a plan. I didn't. Not yet. But as I sat there, the smell of dust and old floral detergent thick in my nose, my mind went to the one place I'd always gone when I needed ground beneath my feet. The base. The chapel on base, to be exact, where we'd had memorial services and change of command ceremonies, where I'd stood in uniform with my hands behind my back and my chin lifted, feeling the weight of my rank like armor. I could almost see the white of my dress whites hanging in the garment bag in my car, crisp and ready. 2 silver stars, ribbons aligned just so. Medals earned the hard way. My family had tried to cut me back down to size with scissors and a note. Maybe the answer wasn't a new dress. Maybe it was refusing to shrink. At 2:34 a.m., I stood, grabbed my car keys and the coin, and crept down the stairs. The porch light cast a harsh circle on the cracked concrete and the ruined rose bushes I'd once tripped over sneaking in past curfew. I paused at the bottom step and looked back through the front window. On the hall table, framed photos lined the surface. Kyle's varsity picture, my parents' wedding portrait, my own OCS graduation shot pushed off to the side, half-shadowed. No wedding dresses in sight. Just the empty space where they'd expected me to crumble. I closed the door quietly behind me. The night air smelled like damp earth and distant ocean. I slid into the driver's seat, the leather cool against my legs, and turned the key. As the engine rumbled to life, my hand went to the garment bag hanging in the back seat. My fingers brushed the smooth plastic, then the solid bulk of the uniform inside. They'd cut every dress. They hadn't touched the one thing that had never been theirs. Mini-hook lodged itself in my chest. If they wanted to see how broken I could be in white, I'd show them. Just not the white they expected. The road to the base was empty at that hour, a dark ribbon cutting through sleeping neighborhoods. Streetlights washed the hood of my car in alternating bands of yellow and shadow. The world smelled like wet asphalt and salt from the bay, the faint tang of something blooming in yards I couldn't see. The farther I got from my parents' house, the easier it was to breathe. At the gate, the sentry's flashlight flashed across my ID, then my face. "Evening, ma'am," he said, straightening when he saw the rank on the card. "Or morning." "Something like that," I replied. The heavy gate clanked as it rolled aside. The familiar buzz of the base swallowed me. Distant generator hum, a barked order from somewhere down by the piers, the low thunder of a ship's ventilation system. I parked near the chapel, under a flickering street lamp that made the world feel like an old film reel. The garment bag hung in the back seat like a ghost. For a moment, I just sat there, hands on the wheel, forehead pressed briefly against the cool leather. My reflection in the rearview mirror looked like someone else. Hair mussed, eyes shadowed, navy t-shirt soft with age instead of starched with ceremony. Then muscle memory kicked in. I got out, grabbed the uniform, and headed toward the admin building cross corridor, where I knew the lights would still be on. The Master Chief was always there, the way the tide was always there. Sometimes high, sometimes low, never absent. Master Chief Hollander's office smelled like bad coffee and metal polish. His door was cracked open, light spilling into the dim hallway. A small desk lamp burned, casting a pool of yellow over stacks of files and a battered challenge coin rack. He was hunched over his desk, reading glasses perched on the end of his nose, pencil moving over a sheet like he was correcting the Navy itself. "Ma'am, if this is about you backing out, I'm not doing the paperwork," he said without looking up. I froze in the doorway. "How did you—" He tapped a finger against his temple. "Old chiefs know when their admirals are driving around base at dark 30 with that look," he said. "Come in or go away. You're letting the AC out." I stepped in. The cool air hit my bare arms, raising goosebumps. The garment bag whispered as I set it down across two chairs. Hollander finally looked up. He took in the PT gear, the circles under my eyes, the way my shoulders had gone too straight. The kind of straightness that meant I was holding something up that was about to collapse. "What did they do?" he asked. No preamble. No assumption they hadn't. I swallowed. "Cut my dresses," I said. "All of them." He blinked once slowly, like he was absorbing a damage report. "And left a note," I added. "You deserve it." His jaw flexed. "Parents?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "And Kyle," from the way he flinched in the hallway. He leaned back, chair creaking, eyes on the ceiling for a long, slow breath. When he looked at me again, his gaze was sharp enough to shave with. "They've never liked the Navy," he said. It wasn't a question. I thought of the years of backhanded comments, the way Mom's mouth would pinch when she saw a new ribbon in a photo, Dad's silence on the nights I called from overseas and tried to talk about anything other than the weather. "Phase," I said. That was Mom's word. Said I'd get it out of my system once I realized it wasn't like the movies. Said a real life had dinners and PTA meetings, not deployments and everything. Hollander snorted. "She say that before or after you pinned on your second star?" he asked. "After," I said. "Impressive consistency," he muttered. The room seemed to shrink around us as old scenes rolled through my head. Dad scoffing at my ROTC brochure. Mom clapping a little too hard at Kyle's high school trophy while ignoring my commissioning photo on the mantle. Their polite, brittle smiles at my promotion ceremony. The way they left early, complaining about the drive home. Hart family likes their hierarchy, Hollander said. Just not when you climb it somewhere they don't control. That's not their uniform, Dad had said once, eyeing my dress blues. That's something else. You forget who you are in that thing. I hadn't. I'd found it. Hollander flicked a glance at the garment bag. What's that? He asked. Insurance, I said. I unzipped the bag. The white of the uniform almost glowed under the fluorescent lights. Jacket crisp, trousers sharply pressed, ribbons already mounted, silver stars gleaming on the shoulders. The smell of starch and dry cleaning fluid rose up, oddly comforting. For tomorrow, I said. If I don't find another dress, or even if I do. Hollander's eyes softened. You thinking about walking in that? He asked. Thinking about walking, I said. Period. He nodded slowly, like a man checking a knot he'd tied. You remember what you told that snot-nosed lieutenant on deployment? He asked. The one who said your uniform made you intimidating to her family? I almost smiled. I said I don't wear it to make them comfortable, I recalled. I wear it to tell the truth about what I've done with my life. And what else? He pressed. I shifted my weight. I said if they couldn't handle the truth, they were free to look away, I said. He pointed the pencil at me. Funny how easy that is to say to strangers, he said. Harder when it's your own blood. The truth landed. I leaned against the file cabinet, the cold metal seeping through my thin shirt. When I was a kid, I said slowly, Mom used to measure us against the doorframe. Little pencil marks. Look how much you've grown, Rachel. Look how tall you are, Kyle. I could still see the smudged lines, the dates scrawled beside them. After I left for the academy, she painted over all of them, I said. Said the doorway looked messy. Hollander's brow furrowed. They don't like visible proof you've changed, he said. That you've grown past what they planned. Maybe, I said. Maybe they still wanted me to show up in something pretty and soft and small. Something that didn't announce itself before I walked into the room. He considered that. What do you want to walk in wearing? He asked. I thought about the shredded fabric on the hallway floor. The note. The years of hearing my career described as a phase, a problem, an inconvenience. I thought about sailors who'd stood at attention in front of me, looking to my uniform for reassurance that someone responsible was in charge. I want to walk in wearing the truest thing I own, I said. And what's that? He asked, though he already knew. I looked at the whites. This, I said. Not the dress they tried to cut. The life they couldn't. He nodded once, decisive. Then that's your answer, he said. Not because it'll make a statement. Because it'll make you honest. My throat clenched. They'll say I hijacked my own wedding, I said. Made it about rank, about the Navy. They already said that, he replied. Before you even thought of this. They cut cloth because they couldn't cut your stars. Their opinion is already filed. He reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a small, round object. Another coin. Different from the one in my pocket. The metal was darker, edges more worn. An anchor on one side, a tiny cross on the other. Picked this up when I was a second class, he said. Chaplain gave it to me the day I nearly punched a captain. My eyebrows went up despite myself. He told me, you don't need permission to stand where you belong, Hollander said. Figured you might need to hear that tonight. He placed the coin beside my whites. Metal and fabric. Old life and new. You know what's going to happen tomorrow?
He asked. Probably, I said, but I'd rather hear your version.
He leaned back, folding his hands over his stomach, the chair squeaking. Guests will show up expecting a pretty bride and some whispered drama, he said. Your family will show up expecting a mess they can control or cancel. And you will show up in the one thing they didn't plan for. The proof that you belong in both worlds, whether they approve or not. He nodded toward the uniform. You walk down that aisle in that, he said quietly. You're not rubbing their faces in your rank. You're telling every kid in that chapel who ever got mocked for what they chose to be that they have the right to bring their full self into sacred spaces.
I let that sink in. The idea felt bigger than my own bruised feelings, bigger than the shredded dresses. It felt like the deck under my feet on a stormy night, unsteady, but undeniably there. What if they walk out? I asked.
Then they walk out, he said. You keep walking forward. Wedding's not a hostage negotiation.
I laughed, shaky. He pointed his pencil at my phone.
Tell your man, he said. He deserves to know what he's standing next to tomorrow.
I texted David in the quiet of that office, the AC humming, Hollander pretending not to watch. Change of dress, I wrote. I'm wearing my whites.
The reply came fast. I'll be the guy at the altar trying not to cry, he wrote. Wear whatever feels most you. I'm marrying the person, not the fabric.
Heat pricked behind my eyes.
Your fiancé's smarter than half our flag officers, Hollander said, reading my face. Don't let them hear you say that, I said. Make sure they see it tomorrow, he replied. We went over the practicalities then, because that's how both of our brains worked. Where to hang the uniform in my childhood home so it didn't wrinkle. How to get dressed without Mom catching sight first. Who to tell in advance, David, his parents, the pastor. Who not to tell at all. By the time I left his office, scarred light was starting to creep into the sky outside, turning the edges of the buildings gray-blue. The base smelled like dew and diesel. Hollander walked me to the door. At the end of the day, he said, hand on the frame, this isn't about punishing them. It's about refusing to let them define what your day looks like.
I nodded.
You walk in that chapel as who you are, he said, not as who they'd rather pretend you stayed.
The words settled into me like ballast.
On the drive back to my parents' house, the coin he'd given me sat next to the one in my pocket, metal clinking softly when I hit a bump. 2 anchors, one for the Navy, one for whatever passed for faith in my family's world. At the top of the driveway, the porch light was still on, casting that hard yellow circle. I killed the engine and sat there a moment, the uniform safe and silent in the back seat. They'd taken scissors to the dresses to remind me I could be cut. Tomorrow morning, I would walk down the aisle in a fabric they hadn't paid for, in a white they hadn't chosen. Not to show off, to stand. That thought carried me up the steps, past the ruined rose bushes, through the quiet kitchen that smelled like cold coffee and leftover gravy. Upstairs, the shredded dresses were still there, limp and ugly in the hallway. I stepped around them, garment bag over my shoulder, and hung my uniform in the back of my old closet. The satin had been theirs. The stars were mine. As I closed the closet door, I caught my reflection in the mirror, barefoot, tired, a little raw. For the first time since I'd come home, I saw something other than the girl they'd left. I saw the woman who was going to walk into a church full of people in the morning and tell the truth without saying a word. And I knew, down in the same place that had carried me through storms, that whatever they did in response, I wasn't breaking. I was finally refusing to bend. Sunlight found the damage first. I woke to a thin bar of it cutting across my bedroom floor, dust motes drifting in the beam. For a second, I was back on a ship. Morning watch, the smell of coffee and metal, the steady thrum of engines under my feet. Then I heard my mother scream. Not my scream from the night before, higher, sharper. The scream of someone who'd done something ugly in the dark and was now forced to see it in daylight. I swung my legs out of bed, heart already up. Voices tangled in the hallway. My father's low rumble, Kyle's higher, defensive tone, Mom's frantic words cutting through. "I told you it was too much. They weren't supposed to. She can't wear—" I opened my bedroom door. The shredded dresses lay where I'd left them, only now the early morning sun highlighted every jagged cut. The satin soaked light and threw it back in broken shards. The note, "You deserve it," hung limp on the closet door, tape curling at the corners. Mom stood in the middle of it, hand over her mouth. She was still in her robe, hair half-pinned, last night's makeup smudged. Dad hovered beside her, jaw set, eyes flicking from the fabric to me and back. Kyle leaned against the wall, arms crossed, looking everywhere but at the note. My presence hit them like a slap. "Rachel," Mom breathed. You weren't supposed to see—" "It's my room," I said. "Hard to miss." Her hand dropped from her mouth. The expression that replaced shock was worse, something between anger and panic. "We were just trying to make a point," she said. "You've turned everything into the Navy, even your wedding. It's too much." "Elaine," Dad warned, eyes narrowing at her choice of words. "Too much," I repeated. My voice was too calm. It scared even me. "You came in here in the middle of the night and cut up my dresses to make a point," I said. "What point was that, exactly? That I shouldn't bring my career into the church? That I should pretend the last 25 years didn't happen so you're more comfortable in the pictures?" Mom flinched. "You've changed," she said. "The girl who left this house is not the woman who came back. You talk like them, walk like them. You never take that uniform off." I glanced down at my Navy PT shirt. The irony would have been funny any other day. "You wanted me to grow," I said. "Just not in a direction you didn't choose." Kyle pushed off the wall. "Come on, Rach," he said. "You're overreacting. It's just fabric. You of all people should know that. You've seen worse." I turned to him. "You're right," I said softly. "I have seen worse. I've also seen better men than you own what they've done. Did you help them?" His cheeks flushed. "They're our parents," he said. "They were upset. You refused to wear the dress Mom picked. You insisted on some custom thing that made you look like an officer more than a bride. They just wanted to remind me whose house I was in," I finished. His jaw clenched. "You've been lording your stars over us since you pinned them on," he snapped. "Who else gets to say they're a rear admiral at 38? You make us feel small." I stared at him. "Me wearing the rank I earned doesn't make you small," I said. "Your choices about what you do with your life do. That's not my burden to carry." Dad stepped between us, hands up. "Enough," he said. "This is not how we talk on a wedding day." I laughed once, mirthless. "Too late for that," I said, gesturing at the floor. He looked at the dresses, then at me. His mouth tightened. "This got out of hand," he said. "We'll call the church. Postpone. Give everyone time to cool down." There it was. The tactical retreat disguised as concern. "You think I'm canceling because you cut up some tulle?" I asked. "Rachel, be reasonable," Mom said. "You can't walk down the aisle in—" "In what?" I asked. "In what I actually am?" My voice had lost the edge now. It was colder, the way it got when storm briefings got serious. I walked past them into the hallway.
The carpet scratched my bare feet. The smell of lemon cleaner from last night's frantic pre-rehearsal scrubbing filled my nose. In my closet, the garment bag hung where I'd left it. Untouched. Waiting. I unzipped it slowly. White gleamed inside. Not soft satin, but sharp, clean fabric. The weight of responsibility stitched into every seam. 2 silver stars on the shoulders. Ribbons aligned handspan over the left breast. My mother appeared in the doorway behind me. "Rachel," she said, "please, don't do this." I turned, holding the jacket up to my front. "Do what?" I asked. "Wear the one white you can't cut?" Her eyes shone with something jagged. "You're not a man," she said. "This outfit, these medals, it's not what a bride is supposed to look like." Heat flared in my chest. "A bride is supposed to look like herself," I said. "This is me. This is what 20 years of service looks like. You've never asked what any of these ribbons cost, but you're happy to pretend they don't exist when it's convenient." "She's right," Kyle muttered. "This is supposed to be about you and David, not a recruitment poster." I folded the jacket over my arm. "This is about me and David," I said. "And the fact that the person he's marrying is a rear admiral in the United States Navy, whose family couldn't stand that enough that they tried to cut her back down to size." Dad leaned on the doorframe, weary. "You walk into that church in a uniform," he said. "You're making a spectacle. People will talk. They'll say we couldn't raise a daughter who knows the difference between a parade and a sacrament." The words hit harder than the note.
People will talk either way, I said. The difference is whose story they'll be telling. Yours, about the difficult daughter who got too big for her britches? Or mine, about the woman who refused to hide what she'd given her life to? We stared at each other. Stalemate. Finally, he sighed. "I can't stop you," he said, "but I won't approve it." "I didn't ask for your approval," I said. "Just your presence, if you can manage it without cutting anything else." His flinch was minimal, but I saw it. Mom's shoulders sagged. "How did we get here?" she whispered. "You started cutting," I said. "I started standing." I closed the closet door gently, uniform over my arm like a promise. "Wedding's in 4 hours," I said. "I suggest we all decide who we want to be in the next 4, because the rest of our lives, we'll remember it." I walked into the bathroom and shut the door. Hot water steamed the small room, fogging the mirror. The smell of my old drugstore shampoo, a scent I hadn't used in years, mixed with the soap, bringing flashes of being 17 again, tying my hair back before a driving test or a school play. Back then, the stakes had felt high. Now, with my dress whites hanging on the back of the door and my family unraveling in the hallway, those memories felt small. Mechanics took over. Wash, towel, moisturizer, hair parted, twisted, pinned. Nothing fancy, just tight and secure, the way I'd worn it under covers and caps 1,000 times. Every movement felt like sliding pieces into place. Not building a princess. Armoring a commander. When I finally put the uniform on, the fabric whispered as it settled over my shoulders, cool against my skin. The weight of the stars pressed lightly. The ribbons sat where they always did, a vertical story only certain people could read. I fastened the last button and looked at myself in the mirror. Rear Admiral Rachel Caldwell stared back. Not Tom and Elaine's daughter, not Kyle's sister, not the girl who left town and came back impossible. A woman who had stood on decks in storms and in conference rooms full of men twice her age, who had signed orders and letters, who had carried more weight than the opinions of 3 people in a hallway. For the first time that morning, My shoulders dropped a fraction. I clipped the small coin Hollander had given me into the inside pocket of the jacket, feeling the reassuring bump under my fingers. Then I opened the door. The hallway went silent. Mom stood at the far end, dressed now in a modest navy blue dress, pearls at her throat. Dad wore his only suit, tie slightly crooked. Kyle had changed into a shirt and slacks, the kind you wear when you want to look like you tried. They all stared. It wasn't the rank first. It was the white. Too stark for this house. Too honest. "You look," Mom started, then choked off whatever she'd been about to say. "Like herself," a voice behind them finished. David. He'd let himself in, probably with the spare key I'd told him about, for emergencies. Apparently this qualified. He stood in the middle of my parents' living room, tie in his hand, dress shirt open at the collar, his eyes on me. For a second, the rest of the room fell away. "You okay?" he asked quietly. I nodded. "You?" I asked back. He smiled, a little shaky. "I'm about to marry a 2-star admiral," he said. "I'm terrified. In a good way." My father bristled at that. "You've really signed up for this?" he asked David. "For all this?" He gestured to my uniform like it was something contagious. David didn't look away from me. "I've signed up for her," he said. "The uniform is part of the package. So is your family, if you want to be." Mom pressed her lips together. "Rachel," she said, "people will stare." "Good," I said. "Maybe they'll see something worth staring at." She winced. Dad tried one last time. "You're sure?" he asked. "Yes," I said. He exhaled, something in his face closing off. "All right," he said. "Then we're going to that church. And we're going to hold our heads up, because whatever else is true, you're still our daughter." The words landed unexpectedly. "Then act like it," I said gently. "Today." The drive to the church was a blur of light and shadow, the world outside the car windows a smear. People turned as we arrived. There's a particular way a crowd moves when it senses good gossip. Heads tilt, shoulders huddle, whispers travel like static. The church parking lot smelled like asphalt and lilies, the bright, oversweet fragrance of wedding flowers already wilting in the heat. Guests in suits and dresses clustered near the steps, programs fluttering in nervous hands. When I stepped out of the car, conversation stopped like someone hit mute. Silence. Then the first murmur. "Is that? She's in uniform. 2 stars." I felt the weight of 100 eyes crawl over me, cataloging silver, ribbons, shine. Some looks were disapproving, some shocked, some something else, curiosity maybe. Recognition. Near the entrance, a small knot of older men straightened unconsciously. Veterans. You can always tell. It's in the posture, in the way their eyes go instantly to insignia instead of hemline. One of them, a man with a cane and a navy tie, raised his hand in a small, slow salute. Not formal, not sharp, just respect. I returned it with a nod, my throat tight. Inside, the sanctuary was a riot of flowers and candles. The air was cool, scented with wax and incense and perfume. Stained glass threw colors across the pews. The pastor hovered near the front, talking in low tones with the organist. He turned and saw me. For a heartbeat, surprise flashed across his face. Then he smiled, a genuine, warm curve. "Admiral," he said softly when I reached him. "Welcome." "Is this acceptable?" I asked, suddenly needing to hear it from someone whose job was literally to arbitrate what was proper in this space.
He studied me.
I've buried soldiers and sailors in this church in their uniforms, he said. Seems right to celebrate a life choice in one, too. Relief washed through me. Thank you, I said. He lowered his voice further. And between you and me, he added, I've heard more sermons preached by a life well lived than by anything I've ever said from this pulpit. I'd say you're doing just fine. Behind us, guests filled the pews, the rustle of programs and whispered speculation a constant backdrop. I could hear my parents being seated in the front row, the scrape of the wooden pew, the intake of breath from older relatives seeing me for the first time. The organist's fingers hovered over the keys, waiting for the cue. I took my place at the back of the center aisle, alone. No father on my arm, no train, no veil. Just cloth I'd bled and sweated in other versions of. I slipped my hand into my pocket. My fingers closed around Hollander's coin. You don't need permission to stand where you belong. The pastor nodded at the organist. The first notes of the processional swelled, filling the space with sound that vibrated in my chest. Conversation died. Everyone stood. Stand. We were seconds away from the moment they'd all remember, whether they wanted to or not. The doors at the back of the church swung open, cool air rushing over my face. All I had to do was take that first step. The rest of my life would follow. The air in the church felt different on the threshold. Cooler than outside, scented with flowers and old wood and the faint tang of candle smoke. The music swelled, the organ's low notes vibrating in my ribs like distant engines. Every head turned. It was a physical sensation, being seen like that. Dozens of gazes sweeping over my whites, catching on the stars at my shoulders, the ribbon rack, the cut of the jacket. For a heartbeat, the girl who'd once tripped over this church's front steps for youth group wanted to turn and run. The woman in the uniform took a breath and stepped forward. One step. The coin in my pocket pressed into my palm. The hum of the organ wrapped around me. The fabric of my trousers whispered with each movement, different from the imagined swish of satin. Third pew in, I saw the first set of faces up close. A cluster of older women, the prayer circle my mother had clung to all these years. Their lips parted. One clutched her pearls in the cliché way I'd always assumed was made up. Next row, a teenager in a too-big suit stared openly, his eyes darting from my rank to my face, something like awe flickering there. His father, in a worn army tie, nudged him lightly, eyes suspiciously bright. On the left, my extended family, the aunts who'd whispered about my phase, the uncles who'd made jokes about pantsuits when I'd first joined. Their expressions ran from shocked to flat disapproval. And then there were the veterans. Scattered through the pews, old Navy caps, a Marine pin, an Air Force lapel. They tracked my progress up the aisle like it was a procession they understood in their bones. As I passed one old sailor in a wheelchair, he reached up, fingers trembling, and brushed 2 knuckles off his temple in the ghost of a salute. I dipped my chin to him. Up front, David stood waiting. He looked steady. Suit sharp, tie straight now, shoulders squared in that quiet way he had. His eyes met mine and held, and the little half-smile he gave me managed to say everything at once. I see you. I choose this. Keep coming. I did. Halfway down the aisle, the weight of absence settled in. Tradition would have put a father on my arm, his steps matching mine. A handoff. I walked alone. Each footfall echoed softly on the stone, layered over the music. I was 3 pews from the front when a motion at the side caught my eye. A tall figure stepped out from the end of a row near the aisle. Dress whites, gold, 4 stars. Admiral Thomas Caldwell, no relation by blood, plenty by history. straightened his jacket, then turned toward me. We'd served together when I was still earning my first oak leaf. He'd been the first flag to treat me like I belonged in the room and not like a fluke. I'd told him about the wedding. I hadn't expected him to come. Now he stood at the edge of the aisle, the congregation's murmur rippling around him. His gaze met mine across that last stretch. "Permission to come alongside, Admiral?" he said quietly when I reached him. The words were simple. The moment wasn't. I swallowed. "Always, sir," I said. He offered his arm. My hand slid into the crook of it, the fabric stiff under my fingers. His presence didn't make me smaller. It made the space around me feel less empty. We walked the last few steps together. I felt my parents' eyes on us as we passed. Mom's face was pale, her hand clutching Dad's forearm. Dad's jaw was clenched so tight I could see the muscle jump. Kyle sat behind them, shoulders hunched, gaze flicking from my uniform to Caldwell's stars, and back like he couldn't decide which bothered him more. At the front, Admiral Caldwell stopped. "Best I can do for a handoff," he murmured. He turned to David, gave him a long, measuring look, then nodded once. "Take good care of her," he said. "She's carried other people long enough." "Yes, sir," David said. His voice didn't shake. Caldwell squeezed my hand once, briefly, like a father might have, then stepped aside and took a seat in the front pew, on the opposite side from my parents. An old line in my head shifted. Blood on one side, chosen on the other. I stepped up to the altar. The pastor's eyes were bright. "Dearly beloved," he began, "we are gathered here in the sight of God and these witnesses to join this man and this woman." His voice rolled out over the crowd, the familiar phrases wrapping around us. I tried to listen, tried to let the words settle where they were supposed to. Commitment, love, covenant. But my attention kept catching on the edges. On the way my mother's hands twisted in her lap. On the tight set of my father's shoulders. On the furtive glances bouncing from my uniform to their faces. We reached the part about, "If any here can show just cause." The pastor paused as tradition demanded. Silence stretched. In the third row, a baby fussed and was quickly soothed. On my left, David's fingers brushed mine, a tiny reassurance. Then, from the front row, my mother's voice, small, brittle, broke the quiet. "Wait," she said. The word landed like a dropped plate. The pastor blinked. "Elaine?" he asked gently. All eyes swung to her. She stood slowly, knees brushing the pew in front of her, the hem of her dress trembling. She cleared her throat. "I have something to say." Heat crawled up my neck. "Mom?" I said quietly. "Not now." She looked at me, and for a second I saw not the woman who'd cut my dresses, but the one who'd sat in bleachers at my high school games, clutching a thermos, eyes bright with pride she'd never quite learned to voice. "We hurt you," she said, voice shaking but loud enough somehow to carry. "Last night, this morning, for years." A murmur swept the pews. Dad reached for her arm. "Elaine, sit down," he hissed. She shook him off. "No," she said. "Tom, we've been wrong. I've been wrong." Her gaze moved to the ruined space in her memory where the dresses used to hang, then to the uniform I was wearing now. "I thought," she went on, "if I could keep you in lace and satin and softness, you'd be safer, closer. Less like your father was when he disappeared into work and ships and things I didn't understand." Her voice cracked. "When you put that first uniform on, I felt like I lost you to something I couldn't reach," she said. "So I spent years trying to pretend it wasn't real.
Her eyes dropped to my ribbons. "I didn't ask what those stitches cost," she said. "I didn't want to know." Kyle stood up beside her, face flushed.
"Mom," he started. She cut him a look. "You helped us," she said. "You picked up the scissors and told yourself it was just fabric. You told yourself she needed to be knocked down a peg." In the back, someone sucked in a breath. "Kyle," I said quietly, "you don't have to—" He swallowed hard. "I was jealous," he said, words tumbling out faster now that the dam had cracked. "You left, did something big. Everyone on base knows your name. I stayed. I'm still figuring out what I'm for. It was easier to call you arrogant than admit I was lost." He looked at my uniform like it was something radioactive and holy at once. "Last night, when Mom said we should teach you a lesson, He grimaced. "I went along. I thought it would just scare you, make you come downstairs and fight. I didn't think about what it would mean to wake up to this." He gestured at the church, at me. He shook his head, shame wiping the bravado from his features. "I'm sorry," he said. "It was cruel. It wasn't a joke. It was ugly." Silence held. I could feel 100 eyes flick from them to me, waiting to see what I'd do. Waiting to see if the bride in the uniform would be harder than the girl they remembered. I took a breath. The smell of lilies and old wood filled my lungs. My voice, when it came, was steady. "You're right," I said. "It was ugly. It hurt. Not because of the fabric, but because of what it said about who you thought I was." I let that sit for a heartbeat. "But," I added, "you're also doing something I stopped expecting from you a long time ago." Mom frowned. "What's that?" "Standing up in front of people and telling the truth," I said. A ripple went through the crowd, soft, approving. On the left, the old veteran with the cane nodded once, as if to say, "There it is." Dad remained seated, jaw tight, eyes shadowed. "Tom," the pastor said gently, "is there anything you want to add?" He stayed still so long the silence turned from expectant to uncomfortable. Then he stood. The movement was stiff, like his bones resisted. "My daughter," he cleared his throat. "Rachel has always been stubborn." A few people chuckled nervously. He looked at me, and for the first time in years, I saw uncertainty in his eyes. "I thought the Navy was a phase," he said. "Like soccer, or that brief period you wanted to play drums." A ghost of a memory flashed. Me beating on pots in the kitchen, Mom laughing, Dad rolling his eyes. The warmth of it collided with the cold reality of last night. "I didn't understand her world," he went on. "So I made fun of it, dismissed it, pretended it didn't matter as much as the life I pictured for her here." He pulled in a breath. "Last night, when Elaine said she hated that dress because it made Rachel look like an officer instead of a bride," he shook his head, "I didn't stop her. I let my own discomfort turn into cruelty." He looked at the uniform now, really looked. "At that rank, people salute her," he said. "They trust her with lives. And I've been treating her like she's still 16 and late for curfew." The words echoed off the high ceiling. A few people shifted in their seats, recognizing their own patterns in his confession. He swallowed hard. "Rachel," he said, "I'm sorry. For last night. For the years before. For every time I used your work as a punchline because I was too proud to say I was scared for you." His hands gripped the pew in front of him. "You don't deserve what we did," he said. "You deserved better parents." The pastor looked between us. "This is holy," he said softly, almost to himself. whether it's what we planned or not.
My chest hurt. In some ways, these admissions, was more disorienting than the sabotage had been. I'd braced myself for their stubbornness, their denial. I hadn't braced for public honesty. The congregation watched like they were witnessing something fragile and dangerous. I could feel what they wanted from me. A tearful reconciliation, a dramatic forgiveness.
A clean bow tied on the end of a messy story. Instead, I touched the coin in my pocket. I accept your apologies, I said. But I also need you to understand something. I looked out over the pews, letting my gaze sweep them the way their eyes had swept me. This uniform, I said, is not a costume. It's not a prop. It's not a stunt I pulled to get attention. It's the truth about how I've spent the last 2 decades of my life. I glanced at my parents. You tried to cut the dresses because you thought you could make me smaller, I said. You can't. Not anymore. My voice gentled. You can stay, I added. You can be part of this day, of my life. But you will never again dictate how I show up in it. The words hung there, boundary drawn in front of witnesses and altar. Somewhere in the middle rows, someone started clapping. It was tentative at first. Then another pair of hands joined, and another. The sound grew, filling the sanctuary with a low, rolling applause that wasn't wild or giddy. It was steady, approving. My mother sank back onto the pew, tears on her cheeks, nodding. Dad stayed standing, shoulders stiff, but he didn't walk out. He turned, slowly, to face the congregation. Instead of shouting them down, he lifted his chin, eyes wet, and did the hardest thing I'd ever seen him do. He stayed. The pastor waited until the clapping softened and ebbed. Then he smiled, eyes shining. Well, he said, voice a little thick. We don't usually get confession, repentance, and boundary setting before the vows, but I have to say, I've heard worse preludes. Soft laughter rippled through the room, easing the tightness. He looked at me and David. Shall we continue? He asked. David's hand found mine, fingers warm and sure. Yes, I said. This time, when the pastor talked about love that bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. The words didn't feel like abstract poetry. They felt like something we'd already started doing. Right there in front of everybody. Bearing ugly truths. Believing we could be better. Hoping for a different pattern. Enduring the discomfort of real change. When it came time for the vows, my voice didn't shake. I promised to stand with David in calm seas and in storms. To tell the truth even when it cost us comfort. To respect the parts of each other's lives that didn't make sense at first glance. He promised to keep seeing me, stars, scars, uniform and all. The rings slid into place, warm metal against skin. By the authority vested in me, the pastor said, and with the full support of everyone who just witnessed this messy, beautiful honesty, I now pronounce you husband and wife. He grinned. You may salute your admiral, he told David, deadpan. The room laughed. David rolled his eyes and kissed me instead. Applause surged again, stronger this time. As we turned to face the congregation for the recessional, something inside me settled. They had seen the worst and the best of us in one morning. There were no illusions left to maintain. All that remained was the walk back down that aisle. Not alone this time. Not pretending. In whites, in front of the people who'd underestimated me, I felt something I hadn't let myself feel in this house for years. Whole. The recessional felt shorter than the walk-in. Music again, but lighter now. Faces blurred as we moved back down the aisle. Congratulations, teary smiles, a few lingering frowns that said, I wouldn't have done it that way, and a few more that said, I wish I had. Outside, the sunlight hit my whites like a spotlight. On the church steps, cameras flashed. Not reporters, just cousins, old neighbors, David's friends. Phones snapped photo after photo. The two-star bride, the stunned but still there parents, the groom who looked like he'd just jumped out of a plane and landed exactly where he meant to. The air smelled like cut flowers and car exhaust. Children ran in circles around the groups of adults, their laughter sharp and bright. The first gauntlet was the receiving line. We stood near the church doors, David and I, then my parents, then his. People filed past, shaking hands, hugging, offering that mix of platitudes and sincerity weddings bring out. A beautiful ceremony, someone's aunt said. Never seen anything like it, said a neighbor. You look so powerful, whispered one of my high school classmates, now a tired-looking mom with a toddler on her hip. My daughter's going to see these pictures. An older man with watery eyes and a Korea veteran cap grasped my hand. Ma'am, he said, voice rough. Took guts. Not the rank, the everything else. Thank you, I said, for noticing. David's side of the family flowed through like a current. Embraces, jokes, awkward in-law small talk. They'd always understood my career better than my own blood had, not because they'd lived it, but because they'd asked. Then came the Caldwells of my childhood. Aunt Linda, who'd once told me, men don't like girls with stronger opinions than arms, patted my arm. You clean up strong, she said, searching for a word that wasn't nice. I prefer honest, I replied. She blinked, then nodded slowly. Uncle Jim, the family storyteller, shook his head and chuckled. Your grandfather would have had a field day with this, he said. Old man used to say, if you're going to break a mold, do it loud enough that the pieces don't hit anyone innocent. Guess I got the wrong generation's blessing, I said. He squeezed my shoulder. You might be giving this one what we missed, he said. Mom stood beside me, shoulders squared, every inch the churchwoman she'd always been. Except now, her eyes kept flicking to my ribbons like she was seeing them for the first time. You all right? I murmured between guests. No, she said, but I think that's the point. Dad shook hands mechanically, offering congratulations with a fixed smile. When people praised the ceremony, the honesty, the courage, he looked conflicted, proud and embarrassed at once. Kyle hung back for a while, eyes on the gravel. When it was finally his turn, he stepped in front of us like a man approaching a firing squad. He hugged David first, clapping him on the back too hard, muttering something about, "Welcome to the chaos." Then he turned to me. Up close, I could see the sleepless circles under his eyes. Guilt sat on him like a too heavy backpack. I meant what I said inside, he murmured. I'm sorry. Really, I wish I could cut the note instead of the dresses. You can't, I said, but you can stop picking up scissors. His mouth twisted. I'll try, he said. And if you ever want to, I don't know, help me figure out how to do something with my life that doesn't involve sabotaging my sister, I'd take the help. It wasn't eloquent. It was real. We'll start with coffee, I said. No scissors allowed. He huffed a laugh, eyes wet. Master Chief Hollander found us near the church steps, hands in his pockets, looking like he was trying very hard not to look proud. Ma'am, he said, nodding at my uniform. Good choice. Couldn't have done it without your late-night therapy, I said. He snorted. That wasn't therapy, he said. That was me making sure you didn't do something stupid like resign your commission and move to Idaho. Tempting, I said. He slipped something into my hand, another coin, heavier than the first, edges sharper. On one side, an anchor. On the other, the words, Truth does not shout. It simply stands. Custom job, he said. Took a favor from the engraver.
I figured if you were going to turn a wedding into a masterclass, we should at least give the students a takeaway. I turned it over, the metal cool against my palm. That's my line, I said, recognizing the words I'd thrown at my parents at the altar, now immortalized in steel. He shrugged. Good lines belong on coins, he said, and on kitchen walls, and in thick skulls. Behind us, Admiral Caldwell approached, hands clasped behind his back.
You keep collecting those, he said, nodding at the coins. You're going to list to port. I'll compensate, I said. He smiled, the gesture crinkling the corners of his eyes. I've seen a lot of ceremonies, he said. Retirements, promotions, funerals. Today, ranks. Pun intended? I asked. Always, he said. David's parents drifted over then. Kind, steady people who'd welcomed me into their family without needing to understand every detail of my job. His mother took my hands. I didn't raise a son to marry a shadow, she said. You showing up like this? That's the only bride I'd want for him. His father nodded. And if anyone in our side of the family has a problem with your stars, they can come talk to me, he said. It hit me then how different this could have been. Another life where my in-laws sided with my parents, called me too much, told David to find someone simpler. Instead, here they were, building a bridge where my own childhood home had tried to cut one down. The reception hall smelled like cake icing and buffet food, chicken, mashed potatoes, something overcooked in a chafing dish. Fairy lights strung across the ceiling cast everything in warm gold. The DJ tested the speakers, a burst of feedback making everyone wince. We did the usual things. Cut the cake, toasts, first dance. Only, they weren't usual. David's best man told embarrassing but kind stories, making me look like a hero for tolerating David's terrible taste in early music. My maid of honor, college roommate, the one who'd seen me through my first deployment, raised her glass. To the only woman I know who can write battle plans and seating charts with the same level of precision, she said. And to the man smart enough to marry into both. Laughter, clinking glasses. Then the pastor nodded toward my side of the room. Would someone from the Admiral's command like to speak? He asked. Hollander shook his head vehemently. Admiral Caldwell sighed, pushed back his chair and stood. The room quieted instinctively. Don't worry, he said dryly. I left my official speech in my other whites. Soft laughter rippled. He looked at me, then at the room. I've known Rachel Caldwell since she was a junior officer with more spine than sense, he said. I've watched her grow into someone people trust with decisions that never make it into the papers. He glanced at my parents. Today, I watched her do something harder than any deployment, he went on. She told the truth to the people whose opinions cut the deepest, and she did it without malice. He turned back to the guests. That uniform she's wearing, he said. The ribbons, the stars, that's one record. The one the Navy keeps. The other record is quieter. It lives in the people who serve with her. In the sailors who sleep better knowing she's on the watch. In the man she married, who knows exactly who he's getting. He lifted his glass. Today, he said, we don't just celebrate a marriage. We correct a story. We honor a woman who refused to be less than she is to make anyone comfortable. He nodded to me. Truth does not shout. It simply stands, he said. And today, Rachel stood. Glasses went up. Hear, hear, someone said. The toast hit different from the usual to love and laughter and happily ever after fare. It felt like a seal on the boundary I'd drawn, a second witness. Later, during the father-daughter dance, there was a pause.
The DJ announced it out of habit. My heart stuttered. Dad and I looked at each other across the room. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then he straightened, walked toward me, each step careful, deliberate. The crowd fell into that awkward, breath-held silence again. "May I?" he asked, stopping in front of me. I thought of saying no, of making a point. Instead, I nodded. "For the record," I said as we stepped onto the floor, "this is a dance, not an absolution." He grimaced. "Understood," he said.
His hand settled on my shoulder, not my waist. The other awkwardly took mine. The song was something soft and old-fashioned, heavy on strings. We swayed. "I don't know how to be the father of an admiral," he admitted quietly, eyes on our hands. I exhaled. "Start by being the father of a woman you respect," I said. "The rest follows." He swallowed. "I can try," he said. "I want to." We moved in slow circles under the fairy lights, my uniform catching glints. "You know," he said, voice rough, "when they first pinned you with those stars, I thought, I never got that far in anything. What does that say about me as a father?" "That I had opportunities you didn't," I said. "That I took them." He nodded, jaw tight. "I twisted it," he said. "Turned your success into my failure, then punished you for it. That's on me." "It is," I said. "And you said it out loud. That matters." He looked up then, really looked at me in the uniform. "You look strong," he said. "Not in the way I thought I feared. In the way I should have been grateful for." Emotion crawled up my throat. "Thank you," I said. The song ended. We parted. He went back to his seat, shoulders a little straighter. I stepped off the dance floor and into a knot of younger cousins and their friends, all chattering at once. "Is it weird being the boss of a ship?" one teenager asked. "How heavy are those medals?" another blurted. "Can girls really do all that?" a little one in a frilly dress asked, eyes wide. I crouched to her level, the uniform creasing slightly. "Girls can do whatever they train for," I said. "This just happens to be what I trained for." She touched the edge of a ribbon, fingertip gentle. "I want to wear something like this someday," she whispered. "Then start by telling the truth," I said. "Even when it's hard. The rest is just fabric." As the night wore down and the DJ switched from dance hits to slower, sleepy songs, I stepped outside for air. The porch light at the reception hall flickered, a yellow halo over the parking lot. The night smelled like damp pavement and leftover buffet food. Admiral Caldwell joined me, hands in his pockets. "You did well," he said. "I didn't throw cake at anyone," I said. "I'm counting that as a win." He chuckled. "Your family's brave," he said. "Not in the way you are. In their own fumbling, late-coming way." "They cut my dresses," I said. "And then stood up in front of a church and cut themselves open," he replied. "I've seen less courage in combat." We watched the moths dance around the light. "You going to let them back in?" he asked. "Not to the control room," I said. "But maybe to the deck, supervised." He nodded. "Fair," he said. "Just remember, boundaries aren't walls. They're fences with gates you control." Inside, I could hear Hollander trying to teach David's elderly aunt how to line dance. I smiled. Tomorrow, the work would begin. Counseling, conversations, new habits. Tonight, we danced on the same floor without pretending nothing had happened. That was enough.
As we went back inside, I slipped the coin Hollander had given me next to the new one in my pocket, both pressed against the fabric of my whites. Dress, uniform, altar, coin. The symbols of the day. The next test wouldn't be in a chapel with witnesses. It would be at a kitchen table with no audience. And that, I knew, would be its own battlefield. The house felt smaller when the flowers were gone. 2 days after the wedding, the vases of lilies and roses that had crowded every flat surface were wilted, their smell souring. Mom pulled them apart over the trash can, petals sticking to her fingers, the stems squeaking as she shoved them into black bags. I watched from the doorway, coffee mug in hand. The kitchen smelled like old coffee and dish soap. Morning light slanted across the table, the same table where we'd eaten weeknight casseroles and where I'd filled out my academy application without telling them until it was done. Dad sat at the far end,
elbows on the wood, staring at a mug he wasn't drinking from. Kyle leaned against the counter, fidgeting with a dish towel. No one was talking. The wedding had forced everything into the open, but after the applause and cake, reality had slunk back in, quieter and more complicated. I set my mug down and sat. "We need to talk," I said. Mom snorted softly. "Feels like that's all we've done for 3 days." "Listening isn't the same as changing," I said. She winced but nodded. Dad finally looked up. "All right," he said. "Say what you need to say." I took a breath. "Last night, after the reception, David and I made a list," I said. "Not of grievances, of boundaries." Kyle groaned. "Here we go," he muttered. "Let her speak," Dad snapped. Then, "Sorry, old habits." I pushed past the flicker of satisfaction. "First," I said, "no more jokes about my rank. No more calling me Little Miss Admiral or mocking my medals at family gatherings. If you don't understand something about my work, you can ask. You don't get to belittle it." Mom's cheeks flushed. "Second," I went on, "no more sabotaging milestones. That sounds obvious, but clearly it needs saying. If you have a problem with how I'm doing something, wedding, promotion, whatever, you bring it to me. In words, not scissors." Kyle nodded, shame flickering. "Third," I said, "if you want to be in my life, you have to be in this life. That means learning. Coming to a base open house if I invite you. Letting me talk about deployment without changing the subject. Meeting the people I work with." Dad shifted, discomfort audible in the scrape of his chair. "You're asking a lot," he said. "I'm offering a lot," I replied. "Access, truth, relationship. That's not free." Mom set the last of the dead flowers aside and wiped her hands on a dish towel. "And what about us?" she asked quietly. "What boundaries do we get?" It caught me off guard, in a good way. "I'm listening," I said. She twisted the towel. "I need you to understand," she said, "that when you disappear for months, sometimes years, my mind goes places. I imagine worst-case scenarios, coffins, phone calls in the middle of the night. It makes me tight, controlling. If I ask too many questions, it's not because I don't trust you. It's because I'm terrified." Her voice shook. "I need you to not punish me for being scared," she said. "But I also need help learning how to handle that fear." I thought of all the Dear Family notifications I'd read, the casualty reports, the times I'd sat with sailors while they called home from overseas. "Fair. I can share more," I said. "Not classified details, but rhythms, expectations, what's normal, what's not. Maybe if the unknowns are smaller, the monsters will be too." Dad cleared his throat. "I need you to talk to us like people," he said, "not like subordinates." I almost bristled, then stopped. He wasn't wrong. When I got frustrated, my voice snapped into command mode. Orders, briefings, no room for mess. "Fair," I said. "I'll work on switching gears when I walk through this door." Kyle slumped into a chair. He hesitated. "I need you to stop being a measuring stick I beat myself with." I blinked. "That's not on me," I said gently. "That's work you have to do with yourself. But I can stop letting Mom and Dad compare us out loud." He huffed a laugh. "That'd help," he said. We sat there, a family of 4 who'd just written a new contract without lawyers. Just honesty. Mom broke the silence. "The pastor called," she said. "He offered counseling. For us. Said he knows a therapist who works with military families. Blended lives." I raised my eyebrows. "You going to go?" I asked. She glanced at Dad. He nodded once. "Yes," she said simply. "If you're willing to give us the chance to try again, we should at least learn how." I swallowed around the lump in my throat. "I'll be back on base next week," I said. "Then deployment after that. Change isn't going to be overnight." "We've wasted decades," Dad said. "I think we can handle starting slow." It wasn't a movie-perfect reconciliation. No soaring strings, no group hug. Just 4 people at an old kitchen table, coffee cooling between us, deciding to do something different. Later, as I packed my bag upstairs, I found the box with the ruined dresses. Mom hadn't thrown them out yet. The fabric lay in torn heaps, satin and lace tangled. The note was gone. I reached in, fingers brushing the shredded edges. For a second, anger flared again, hot and clean. Then I saw it differently. Not as a wound, but as a before. I took a small scrap, a bit of lace with a clean edge, and folded it into my palm. Downstairs, Mom found me at the door. "You taking anything?" she asked, trying for lightness. I held up the scrap. "Souvenir," I said. She winced, then nodded. "That's fair," she said. Before I left, I stepped out onto the porch. The light over the door clicked on automatically, bathing the cracked concrete in yellow. I looked up at it, the same bulb that had watched me sneak in late as a teen, the same one Dad had toggled the night of the sabotage. Without thinking, I reached up and unscrewed it halfway. The light flickered, then went out. Mom gasped softly behind me. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Resetting the sensor," I said. "It's been aimed one way for a long time." She understood. "You'll come back?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "But I'll be coming back as me. Not as a version you prefer." She nodded. "I think I finally want that," she said. On base the next week, everything felt sharper. Work didn't pause because I'd had a dramatic wedding. Reports still needed signing. Briefings still needed giving. Ships still needed shepherding. In my office, the air smelled like fresh coffee and dry paper. The flags behind my desk stood straight, colors muted. I slid the scrap of lace into the small shadow box on my shelf, next to my first set of ensign bars, and the shell I'd picked up on my first overseas port call. Dress. Uniform. Both part of the story now. Master Chief Hollander knocked once, then walked in without waiting for an answer. "Married life treating you all right, ma'am?" he asked. "So far," I said. "We survived a grocery run without arguing. I'm calling it a good start." He grinned. "How's the original family?" he asked, more carefully. In counseling, I said. Working on it. We have a ceasefire. With terms. Not bad for a week's work, he said. He glanced at the lace in the box. What's that? He asked. Evidence, I said. Of what? He pressed. That you can't uncut something, I replied. But you can decide what story the pieces tell. He nodded, satisfied. Your folks came to base orientation yesterday, he said casually. My heart jumped. They what? Family day, he said. Command spouses and parents. They showed up late, sat in the back, listened to the whole spiel about deployments and communication. He smirked. Your dad asked a question about bandwidth and time zones, he said. Didn't even make a joke. Unexpected warmth spread through my chest. Progress, I said. You going to invite them to the ship tour next month? He asked. I hesitated. Maybe, I said, if they keep doing the work when nobody's watching. He gave me a look. Sounds familiar, he said. What does? I asked. Being the same person in private that you pretend to be in public, he said. Some people never manage it. You forced your family to see it. Now you've got to make sure you keep doing it too. He was right. The uniform had made a statement in the church. The real test would be whether I lived up to it in quiet hallways and late-night phone calls and holidays where no one clapped. That thought settled in my bones. That night, as David and I unpacked boxes in our new on-base quarters, the living room smelled like cardboard and takeout. The walls were bare, the furniture mismatched. What should go up first? He asked, holding a hammer. I looked at the two stacks in front of us. 1. Frame degrees, certificates, commendations. 2. A simple, unassuming frame with our wedding photo. The one where I was in whites, he was in a suit, and behind us, the church doors framed a crowd of faces that now knew the truth. Both, I said. I pointed at the wall opposite my desk nook. Medals and awards there, I said. Wedding photo right in the middle. No separation. He smiled. Blending the worlds, he said. Refusing to pretend they're separate, I corrected. We hung the photo first. Hammer tap, hook in the drywall, glass catching the light. 2 worlds in one frame. Bride and admiral. Not either or. And as the frame settled, level and straight, I felt something in me do the same. The next step was quieter, but no less important. The hanger smelled like jet fuel, hot metal, and coffee someone had burned 3 hours ago. Family day was always chaos. Kids running underfoot, spouses half lost in mazes of equipment, sailors trying to explain complicated systems in simple words. The soundscape was a mash of laughter, shouted questions, and the constant, distant whine of engines. I stood near the nose of a gleaming gray aircraft, uniform crisp, hands clasped behind my back. A cluster of sailors and families gathered as the PA system crackled. Rear Admiral Caldwell will say a few words, someone announced. I hadn't planned on it. I rarely did. But I knew the drill. I stepped up on the small platform they'd hastily set up, the metal vibrating under my boots. Afternoon, I said. I'll keep this short. You've got more interesting things to climb on. A ripple of chuckles. I scanned the crowd. David, hands in his pockets, shoulder to shoulder with Hollander. Kara, now a newly minted officer, hovering near a display, a group of kids hanging on her every word. And at the back, near the open hangar doors, my parents and Kyle. They'd come. Mom wore sensible shoes and carried a tote bag stuffed with pamphlets. Dad's base visitor badge hung crooked on his shirt. Kyle had his arms folded, but his eyes were wide, tracking every piece of hardware like he was trying to memorize it. They hadn't walked out when I'd sent the invite. They hadn't made jokes about parades. They'd just said, "Tell us where to go, what to bring, and what not to touch."
Progress. Most of what we do here doesn't show up on TV, I told the crowd. You won't see your sailors day to day on the news. That's by design. Quiet work keeps loud disasters from happening. I thought of the church, of the way the silence had fallen when I'd walked in whites. Sometimes, I continued, the bravest things people do never get applause. They just stand where they're needed. On flight decks, in control rooms, at home, at kitchen tables, listening to stories that are hard to hear. I didn't look directly at my parents, but I saw Mom's hand reach for Dad's. If you leave here today with one thing, I said, let it be this. Ask. Ask what their days are like. Ask what they're proud of. Ask what they're scared of. You may not get details, but you'll get honesty. That's worth more than any medal. It wasn't a speech I'd planned. It was the one I needed at 16. As I stepped down, the crowd clapped. Not uproarious, just steady, warm. A few sailors' parents wiped at their eyes. A boy in a hoodie whispered, "Cool," like he'd just discovered something new he wanted to be. As the group dispersed, Mom and Dad approached slowly, like they weren't sure if they were allowed to step into this world without tripping an alarm. You explain that well, Mom said. Her voice was softer now when she talked about my job, less brittle. Years of practice, I said. Dad glanced around, taking in the aircraft, the sailors, the equipment. Hard to keep thinking of it as a phase when you see all this, he said. Good, I replied. Kyle shoved his hands in his pockets.
The briefing earlier, he said, about deployments and communications and all that. I didn't realize how structured it was. I thought you just disappeared. I do, I said, but with a schedule. He huffed a laugh. I signed up for a night class, he said abruptly. Engineering basics. Figured if my sister can command all this, I can at least try to understand how it works. Emotion flickered low in my chest. That's great, Kyle, I said. You might like it. He scuffed his shoe on the concrete. I thought maybe... He hesitated. Maybe someday you could show me around. One of the ships, if that's allowed. It is, I said. We'll make it happen. Mom reached into her tote bag and pulled out something wrapped in tissue paper. I brought you something, she said, almost shy. For your office. I lifted the paper. Inside was a small, simple frame. The wedding photo. Not the one where I looked perfectly posed. The one someone had snapped when we weren't looking. Me in whites, laughing at something David had whispered. My parents and Kyle visible behind us in the crowd, mid-applause, faces open and unguarded. She'd written in small, neat letters on the mat. Rachel and David. The day we started telling the truth. My throat tightened. Thank you, I said. She smiled, eyes wet. I've been reading, she said. Books about military families, about how easy it is to make everything about our fear instead of your reality. She shrugged, embarrassed. The counselor recommended them. You're doing the work, I said. That matters. Dad glanced at the photo. You know, he said, when people in town ask me now about my kids, I don't just say, Rachel left and Kyle stayed. I raised an eyebrow. What do you say? I say my daughter commands ships and walks into churches wearing the truth, he said. And my son's figuring out what his version of that looks like. Kyle's ears turned pink. It's a long way from where we started, Dad admitted. But I'm proud of both of you. It landed differently this time. Not as something I craved, not as approval I needed like oxygen, as a gift. Welcome, not essential. We walked through the hangar together. I watched Mom listen as a young sailor explained a maintenance schedule. I saw Dad ask a chief how long a deployment really felt, then actually listen to the answer. I saw Kyle stand next to a helicopter, eyes alight, asking about engines and lift like a kid seeing the ocean for the first time. Later, after they'd gone home with pamphlets and new vocabulary and a promise to attend our next family day, I stood in my office alone. The late afternoon light slanted through the blinds, striping the wall. On my shelf, the shadow box held its mismatched collection. The scrap of lace from the ruined dress. The first ensign bars I'd ever pinned on. The challenge coin Hollander had given me. Truth does not shout, it simply stands. The other coin from Family Day. For courage unseen. Next to the shelf, on the wall, hung my medals and commendations. In the middle, framed neatly, our wedding photo. The one Mom had brought. 2-star bride, steady groom, crowd behind us standing. Below it, on the filing cabinet, sat a plain manila folder labeled in my handwriting, Caldwell Family, New Pattern. Inside were notes from counseling sessions, printouts of emails where my parents asked about my deployments without making them about their fear. Kyle's texts about his class. At the bottom, a sticky note in Dad's cramped writing. Proud of who you are, not just what you do. Dad. I ran my fingers over the words. Years ago, I'd thought the only way to be whole was to choose family or service, dress or uniform, altar or command. What I'd done instead, on that brutal, beautiful day, was refuse the false choice. I'd walked down the aisle in 2-star navy whites because they'd cut the dresses, but I'd stayed in them, there and after, not to spite them, to tell the truth. That truth had hurt. Had humiliated, exposed, forced decades of rot into the light. It had also given us something we'd never had before. A chance to build a family on respect instead of pretense. My phone buzzed, a message from Mom. Pastor asked if you'd speak at the young adults' night next month, about service and calling. I said I'd ask, no pressure. I smiled. Tell him yes, I typed, but he's not getting another public therapy session for free. She sent back a laughing emoji, then, we'll be there to listen, not to correct. I set the phone down. In the quiet, I looked at the medals, at the photo, at the lace, at the coins, at the life I'd carved with all its scars and seams. Once I'd waited for them to choose me, to say, we see you, we're proud, you belong. I wasn't waiting anymore. I had walked. Down aisles, onto decks, into rooms that were not built with someone like me in mind. I'd stood when it would have been easier to shrink. And in standing, I'd given them a chance to do the same. Some took it. Some were still learning how. That was their journey. Mine was simpler now. I straightened my jacket, feeling the familiar pull of the fabric over my shoulders. Outside, engines roared as a jet took off, the sound rattling the window glass. I smiled, a small, steady thing. Then I turned back to the stack of reports on my desk. There was still work to do. There would always be work to do. But now, when I walked into any room, chapel, hangar, kitchen table, I knew exactly who I was and where I stood. And I knew this down to my bones. Strength is walking forward, not waiting to be chosen. If you've ever been underestimated by family, follow Honor Line for stories of dignity, courage, and rewriting what it means to be strong.